Hi and welcome to the Girly Grunge Cardboard Cross class. To begin, you're going to need 2 cardboard crosses. I just used 2 pieces of 12 by 12 cardboard. I drew a cross on the front of one of them, and then I cut it out and used that one as the stencil for the second one. I wasn't going for perfection. I like things to be kind of wobbly and imperfect, so it didn't really matter if the lines were totally straight. I just wanted the width of the vertical part and the horizontal part to be really close to the same size. You'll notice in the cardboard cross that's on the top of the stack that there's a slit across the top of it. And I did that for you to be able to hang the cross on the wall. I didn't put a hole in the center because if you're going to embellish the front and it's heavier on one side, a hole in the center will make your cross hang kind of crooked. So if you have the slit going across the top, you can move the cross around on the nail so that it will hang straight. You're also going to need some strips of cardboard so that you can make it 3-dimensional. You can have the strips really thin, like a 1/2 inch, so it won't be very far out from the wall, or even really thick, like 2 or 3 inches if you want it maybe even to sit on top of a counter or something like that instead of being hung on the wall. Or it can just stick really far out from the wall if you'd like. Whatever size you're going to use, you just have to make sure that each piece of cardboard strip is the same width, as close to being exact as possible. That way it will make it so that your cardboard cross is the same width from top to bottom and not too wonky. I mean, you like wonky a little bit, but not too wonky. I like to use low temperature hot glue. First of all, because I always burn myself with the regular temperature hot glue. And secondly, it seems like you can move things around in the hot glue a little bit if it's the low temperature. I don't know if it works like this for other people, but it seems like the drying time might be a little bit longer. So doing a project like this, it makes it a little bit easier because you can do your little swirl of hot glue on the cardboard and have enough time to get the strip of cardboard into it before the glue dries. So I did it going across the cardboard cross first. Then I did the same thing on the bottom. You do want to go pretty quickly though if you're going to do a bigger section like this. You want to make sure there's plenty of glue on your glue stick when you do this so you don't have to switch midway between. So you do the glue first and then add the cardboard strip again. And then you do the same thing for the top of the cross. Now this is where you really want to make sure that you've got a new glue stick ready to go or in your glue gun, because I did the entire top of those cardboard strips all at one time. And this is why I also think you should use the low temperature glue, because it gave me enough time to not only cover all of the tops of the strips with the hot glue, but I was able to put the top piece of cardboard on and move it around so that I made sure that the sides were lining up. Once you've got the 2 pieces together, it should look something like this photo. So now you've got your 2 pieces, but the sides are totally open. So I just used some craft packing paper that I had and some regular Elmer's white glue to add some sides to the project. I just painted on the glue first, put the paper down, and then painted the glue over the top. So it's a lot like the decoupage that I normally do on my projects with vintage book papers, but I was just using regular craft paper for this. So after I got that front part on, then I used the glue, painted it on the back, and folded the paper over, and I kept it kind of tight around the edges so that it would have a nice flat edge on all of the sides. Then once you bring it around, remember you want to paint over the top of it again with that glue. When you're going to be wrapping the sides, you want to make sure that you add glue to the underside or the inside of the paper where it's going to be folding together. Otherwise, you're going to have big lumps and stuff. And there isn't a right or wrong answer to what your sides look like at the very beginning, as long as you get all of the holes covered towards the end. As you can see in that last picture, that's kind of wonky and it looks a little bit weird. You don't have to follow my example exactly for doing the sides. You can make it cleaner, or if it doesn't look as clean, that's fine, as long as the sides are nice and flat. You just cover with the glue, add the paper over it, fold it around, and then paint over with glue again. And you just keep doing that on all of the sides until the entire cross is covered and there aren't any holes along the edges. So once you have your cross completely done, then you can paint the whole cross, the front and the sides. You don't have to worry about the back, but if you get it on the back, it's not a big deal. I used Liquitex Basics paint. It is a nice quality paint, but not quite as expensive as the professional grade paint. But for home decor and crafts, this is the perfect paint to use. Now this red is way more red than I wanted it to be. I was making this for my sister and she has a lot of burgundy and maroon type colors in her home decor. So I needed to change this color, and it's so simple to do when you just add a little bit of smooch spread, surprisingly. So I didn't have that burgundy color, so all I did was take some wood stained smooch spritz over the wet paint and then used my paintbrush to kind of blend it together. And then I used a heat gun and dried the front and the sides and everything. You want to make sure that the cross is completely dried before you move on to the next step. It's really, really important. Also remember that when you're using a heat gun on paint, it will bubble if you hold it really close to it or too long in one spot, which is fine if you like that look. I do kind of like that look, and so I will purposely do it in a couple little spots, but if you're not expecting it, it could shock you. So just be ready. If you want bubbles, then hold the heat gun kind of close to the paint and hold it in one spot for a little while. And if you don't, make sure you keep the heat gun far back. This is what my cross looked like after it was completely dried. In the two bowls on the bottom, I've got paint and water, and I've also got glue. You want to have both of these bowls ready to go because you do the next two steps really quickly, one right after the other. The bowl that has the black lip around the top has white acrylic paint and water in it. And I was trying to make it so that you can see the ratio of paint to water. It's still really hard to see because it's a white bowl. I should have used a bowl that was a different color. But basically, you want the paint water mixture to be about the thickness and the opacity of coffee creamer. So in this picture, you can kind of see how thick the paint water mixture is on the paintbrush. Now you can see that I have painted the entire cross, the front and the sides, with that Elmer's glue. In this picture, I'm showing the difference between the paint mixture and the glue. The glue is still freshly wet. You need to paint over it while it's wet, and you need to have a really light hand. Don't press your paintbrush into the glue. You don't want them to mix. You're just lightly laying that paint and water mixture over the top of the glue so that it's two separate layers. That's how you're going to be able to get a really good crackle. And once I was done painting, this is what it looked like. Now you're going to use a heat gun while it's still wet. And you can see in the second and third photo how you can get those really big cracks in the paint when it's got that glue underneath. Now, as you're doing this, there's going to be spots that look kind of opaque, and that's the glue underneath the paint. You can hold your heat gun there, and you might get some more of the little bubbling, or you can get it so that it's done with the cracking, because you'll see that at one point it won't give you any additional cracks, but it still may be kind of opaque underneath. You can just leave it at that point and then come back to it the next day, and then that glue should be clear. And this is what it should look like. I left mine overnight, and this is what it looked like when I came back to it the next morning. Now we're going to add some color to the edges of the cross. I'm using my Mixed Media Inks chalks. The wonderful thing about these chalks is that when you use them over an area that is painted or that has some kind of a decoupage or something that's going to make the surface semi-non-porous, you can actually blend them. If you were using this on straight paper that doesn't have any kind of a finish on it, there's really not a lot of blending that you can do. That you can blend them a little bit, but when it's on this type of a surface, you have much more blending capabilities. So what I did is I used the driftwood chalks around the edges, and then I blended it with my hand. You don't have to use your hand. You can also use some kind of a blending tool, but you want to put the ink around the edges and then blend it a little bit towards the center so it gives it kind of that vintagey kind of a feel. The next color that I added was pomegranate, and this is a much darker color. And when you're using a darker color, you're going to want to be a little bit quicker than when you're using the lighter colors. And you also want to make sure that you start with your light colors first and then move to your darker colors afterward. Now when I was done with the pomegranate, that top long edge was much darker than I wanted it to be. So I used my driftwood chalks, and I just put my fingers right into the pad so that there was some of the chalks inks on my finger, and I blended right over the pomegranate. And because I'm adding more of the chalks to it, it made the chalks more blendable. So that is another really awesome feature about the chalks inks. The last color that I added was my Midnight chalks, and I just tapped it along the very edges and then blended slightly with my finger because I really wanted the edge to be a darker edge and not really overwhelm the other colors. I've learned from past beading mistakes that if I'm trying to add a long piece of ribbon or twine or thread to a project, I can't add my beads on as I'm going. They really need to all be on the whatever material I'm going to be using first, and then just kind of move them along as I'm going, because if you try to add them as you're going, you're going to be threading from the long side, and it makes it really difficult. So in this picture you can see that I've got that the first bead set going across, and then I've moved all of the others along. Then as I wrap it around in the second photo, you can see the second set of beads is now on the bottom right hand side, and the rest of them are up at the corner. And then this is what I ended up with when I was done with the twine and the beads. So I have the twine going across the top and the bottom portion of that section, but I didn't tie it off yet because I'm going to be adding some embellishments. So the heart with the little red cross in the center was from a necklace that I had years and years ago, and the necklace broke, but it was still in my little box of tchotchkes for my jewelry stuff. And then the home was an embellishment from scrapbooking, probably from close to 10 years ago. And I used a little safety pin to adhere the charm to the twine, and then I used the three-dimensional dots behind the cross and behind the home because I didn't want those to be moving around on the bottom. I wanted them to stay put on that side. So after I added those on, I took some organza ribbon and threaded it through the safety pin and tied it into a bow. Then I cut the ends, and I wanted to make sure that the ends stayed where I had them, one on the side and one on the front. So I used the medium dots, which is just a thin little clear adhesive dot, and I put them on the very base of the ribbon so that they would stay in place, but you totally can't even see them. And this is what the cross looked like when I was finished. And here are some close-ups of the charms and the beads and the crackle texture and the bottom of the ribbons.